Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Jeongmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Korea Pro podcast. It is Thursday, September 19th, a little before 3 p.m. We are finally back at work after a long Chuseok holiday weekend. So for those of you who did not work, I hope that you guys had a restful time. But before we continue, I would just like to make another quick reminder. If you are listening and if you have any questions that you would like for us to respond to or address, please send us an email to podcast@koreapro.org. Now, we're going to have to start right away. The Federal Reserve just announced overnight in South Korea time that they are going to cut the interest rates by half a percentage point. We talked about this with Jeongmin last week. I got it wrong. Jeongmin got it right.
I made the right bet. So what was the reason for the Federal Reserve to make this decision, John?
Well, what the Fed said was that they were quite comfortable with the employment numbers and with the inflation numbers. The Fed was saying that inflation is within their range that they consider acceptable. But so what they're really more concerned about is not so much inflation anymore, but growth. They're worried that if they maintain the interest rates, which is quite high actually, they're suggesting that this might affect overall export numbers, overall industrial growth within the country. And so they decided to have a significantly larger than anticipated cut.
So what would be the direct implications for South Korean Bank, which will make its announcement for the rate in October, I believe?
Well, it's going to be a little bit mixed, to be honest. And that's because now that the Fed has actually cut the interest rates, it has narrowed the gap between the Korean and the U.S. interest rates. And so what this means is that because of this narrowed gap, there's going to be some financial volatility. The dollar is going to weaken over time because of the lower interest rates. And what this means is that the won will appreciate, which could have some bad news implications for exporters. The South Korean goods are going to be more expensive in the global market. But at the same time, it's also going to make imports cheaper. If you look at the data, South Korea has been exporting a lot of semiconductors and chips. But most of South Korea's imports has been energy over the past few months. And because in the global energy market, it's all dealt with in dollars, it is going to make energy imports a bit cheaper. And so it's going to have some mixed results.
And the million-dollar question, of course, is whether or not South Korea will also slash its interest rate. There are a lot of complicated factors that the Bank of Korea faces. What are some of the complications right now?
Well, South Korea also has quite good job numbers. Again, if you look at the data, if you dig in and start to see who is being employed and what kind of sectors they're going into, it's not that much of a rosy picture. But if you look at the overall aggregate employment numbers, it's looking quite good.
It's slow but increasing.
It's increasing. And if you also look at inflation numbers, it's also at around 2%. And that's based on the consumer price index. And so it is going to be... So South Korea is also under pressure to also reduce interest rates. But the really big problem that's holding the BOK back, of course, is household loans. And household loans has been such a ballooning cost. It's almost 100% of this country's GDP at this point. That the the BOK is worried that if it reduces interest rates, it will make borrowing cheaper, which in turn will inevitably lead to a lot of people borrowing money to again buy more apartments, which will again cause apartment rates to go up, household loan rates to go up. And so the BOK is in a bit of a tough spot.
Right. And so they are trying to come up with other longer term solutions to address the broader picture question here, the real estate market, which we will discuss later with Joon Ha joining us today. Before we move on to that, what's your prediction for the South Korean bank's decision in October?
In October, I think it's not going to change much. The BOK is going to want to be certain that cutting interest rates is not going to exacerbate the housing loans. But if it doesn't cut it in October, it's only going to meet one more time this year. It will be in November. Now, will it cut it in November? That's just 30 more days than what's in October. So I'm not quite certain. I'm not willing to bet that the BOK is going to cut interest rates just yet. no matter how much pressure that is under right now.
Right, and we heard from experts that the market rate already sort of predicted this is going to happen and sort of adjusted itself.
It's already adjusted, exactly.
Moving on to the second topic, President Yoon Suk-yeol, after the Chuseok holiday, he is visiting the Czech Republic. Before he departed, he said something about the lawsuit.
Now, for those of you who are not quite sure what we mean by lawsuit, we have to go back to July. In July, the Czech Republic announced that KHNP, Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Corporation, was chosen as its preferred bidder to help construct its new nuclear power plant.
And this was like a state-led lobbying, sort of, because there were multiple summits beforehand.
Exactly. And this was the first new nuclear power plant project that KHNP would be involved in since Baraka in the UAE.
Like 15 years ago, right?
Exactly. But what's going on is that, of course, KHNP is right now going through a legal battle with the U.S. energy company Westinghouse Electric, which is claiming that the nuclear reactors that South Korea is exporting is infringing upon its own copyright laws, and that KHNP cannot export this technology without Westinghouse's permission.
Right.
And so Westinghouse Electric, and not just Westinghouse, but also EDF, which is the French energy company, have filed a complaint against the Czech Republic saying that they want the Czech Republic to review its election process. And so right now, because all of it is up in the air right now, Yoon is going to the Czech Republic. He's already met with the Czech National Security Advisor a few weeks ago. And the Czech National Security Advisor had said that he's confident that this project will go ahead. But now that the president is actually going to the Czech Republic, it's actually showing how serious the South Korean government is about trying to win this contract.
And it seemed like this was like an interview in advance on Reuters this morning. Yoon said that he is sure that the lawsuit will be resolved positively.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm a betting man if I would have made that statement. That's a bridge too far. The South Korean president is a powerful person in South Korea, but this is an international lawsuit. I'm not sure that he has the influence over the U.S. legal system and over the Czech Republic to ensure that this actually, goes along with what KHNP wants.
Moving on to the next topic, we briefly mentioned the real estate market. I did mention this a couple of times before in the Korea Pro podcast episodes and also our Seoul Circuit events before. South Korea's real estate market actually very closely relates to the education system, culturally, socially, and also just market-wise,
Right.
because there are preferred regions for South Koreans to live in, especially parents, in order to get better access to reputable education district for, middle school and high school and whatnot. So Joon Ha, you wrote about this following the Bank of Korea, I believe, the governor's statement about without transforming South Korea's education system, this whole real estate market cannot really change. Can you walk us through just quickly what the story was about?
Yeah, so the Bank of Korea, they proposed a reform on August 29th, if I'm correct, for the country's university's admission system in order to address the economic inequality that stems from the education system itself.
Decades-old problem.
Absolutely. And the proposal suggests implementing a regional proportional selection system where university spots would be allocated based on youth populations across the country's nether regions. And the proposal does suggest that universities in South Korea would set their own criteria for regional divisions and residency requirements, with admissions allocated proportionally based on the high school student population in each different region. For this, the BOK argues that universities would maintain some flexibility by possibly broadening admission units or admitting students without fixed majors.
Well, I personally think that's a great start, but I myself also personally experienced this 지역 특별 전형 and stuff, the regional proportion. But right now the number is really quite low. So the premise here is that if you increase the quota for people who live outside Seoul metropolitan area, people will crave less about moving to Seoul, basically. It seems like that's the premise. But the thing is, because the quota is so small, like even if it increases, people who live outside Seoul still goes to hagwons in Seoul, the private academies in Seoul. Did the governor say anything about private education's relations to this?
He didn't say anything about private education. He just said that the universities, this is not something that the government should intervene to do, but instead that universities themselves can actually change their policies and go ahead with regional quotas. So he's asking the university
Absolutely,
yeah.
to...
But without tackling the hagwon system, that sounds like it's trying to solve a problem just on the surface level without actually going into the root causes.
I mean, it's better than nothing, but that would be a big elephant in the room.
But okay, let's assume for a moment that the BOK governor gets exactly what he wants. Not just the universities, but also the hagwons. They decide to move to all of these regions. And let's say that this ideal situation is something that people agree to. But we also have to talk about pushback. Now, whenever the government usually makes any of this kind of proposal, someone's eventually going to lose out on their money. So walk us through this. Who is pushing back against the BOK's proposal and why?
So a couple of educators and also parents of children who are sending their kids to these private education systems, hagwons around Seoul, they've been pushing back. They're concerned that if we do increase the regional quota by said %, then they could lower the educational quality of these regions and also Seoul, reduce institutional competitiveness, and also lead to unintended effects on how the population is distributed all around the country. They're saying that, it could actually be a kind of contrasting effect on the people that it's actually trying to serve.
So this sounds a lot like NIMBY, basically.
Yeah.
I got mine, so why am I losing out to help someone else? Is that it?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, what are your personal thoughts on it that you did not include into the analysis, Joon Ha? To read the full analysis, please visit koreapro.org.
So I had the entirety of my schooling at an international school overseas, so I never really experienced the South Korean educational system, but I was always aware of the fact that, South Korea does have quite the rigor in its university admissions, especially the Sunung exam. But at the same time, I think that, while it is a good start, it's a proposal. Let's not forget, it's not something that the government has introduced.
It's not a policy yet.
No, but it's something that schools and also communities should learn to debate on. However, South Korea's focus at the moment, or the BOK's focus at the moment, seems kind of disproportionately focused on university admissions rather than, a broader educational reform,
right.
Which is the kind of issue at hand. So the current approach feels more like a fixation on entrance exams rather than kind of regional development of educational systems, schools, institutions.
Right,
and
part
whatnot.
of the problem. They should start somewhere, but it's not enough,
No.
right? I've heard someone who argue, I think it was at one of the Seoul Circuit events, saying, why don't South Korea come up with, other than SKY, Seoul, National, Korea, and Yonsei universities, to be top universities, not just in Seoul? It's very ideal, even utopian situation. But would something like that help the situation?
Well, if we can figure out how to make it happen, then we wouldn't be sitting here now, would we?
Right. And also, I have a lot of personal opinions about this, but just one of it is, I don't think this will be resolved. Despite any perfect, beautiful policies, without changing the social norms about social status.
It's not just policy, it's zeitgeist.
Yeah, people who move to Seoul, it's partly about the education, but it's also about showing your status, your wealth to your friends and families and whatnot. And that's not going to change easily. And I don't know what the government can do to change that, actually. Although Song Tae-yoon, the director of national policy, recently at a briefing with foreign correspondents briefly mentioned this, saying that social norms is something we have to change in order to solve, ultimately, the real estate problem.
Easier said than done.
Right. And he admitted he has no clean solution, silver bullet for it.
Stay ahead in understanding South Korean politics, business and society with a Korea Pro subscription. Gain access to daily email newsletters, expert briefings and exclusive events designed for professionals like you. As a podcast listener, you can now try Korea Pro for free and subscribe at a discounted rate if you like what we're doing. Equip yourself with the insights that matter most. Visit koreapro.org/podcast to subscribe and ensure you never miss a critical update. Korea Pro, never be sidelined again.
Week ahead. Next week, actually starting today, Thursday, the National Assembly resumed and they're holding a plenary session and they are restarting the political spat between the opposition party and the ruling party about the special prosecutorial investigations against the First Lady, the proposed ones against the First Lady and regarding the Marine's death last year, and also this controversial bill that the opposition party unilaterally passed the Judiciary Committee for the state to mandate the state to financially support the regional gift vouchers.
I'm not quite sure how much support that the PPP will be able to muster for this, especially considering how much the ruling party and the president is favoring cutting down spending. But right now, the National Assembly is fully controlled by the opposition party, especially the Judiciary Committee. So it's going to be an ongoing tug of war between these two factions.
Right. In the coming weeks, the National Assembly will be debating the budget as well. So we will keep hearing about these bills.
And all of this information will be sent to your email inboxes by Monday at 2 p.m. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
And I'm John Lay. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.